I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Carissa Isaacs, who is the Director of Producer Resources with Superior Farms. And today she's going to visit with us about a packer's perspective on the final product. So Carissa, welcome and thank you. And I'll pass it on to you.
I'm going to really build off of what Travis started with. So that was a perfect introduction into what we're talking about today. One of the things that was brought up is what are constraints in the industry, whether it's affecting the packer or the producer. And as we look through constraints currently in the industry, I mean, these are things that are affecting all of us, whether we're talking about labor and Western range operations, the increased regulations on H-2A workers, we're talking about increased wages. Those are hurting producers, and those are questions, those are constraints that make producers question, can we stay in this another year? And just as we see that with our producers, we're experiencing the exact same thing at the packer level. We've increased our wages about 20% in the last 18 months. And even with those wage increases, and we are by no means close to minimum wage in any of the states that we have plants, but we are still running about 15% short by head count in both of our facilities in Denver and Dixon both. Just trying to get labor in there and run the plants efficiently is a struggle. We also see a huge struggle in the industry with drought and wildfires and just weather in general. And that's, you know, any year to year, what's happening that affects feed costs. And as these constraints push on the industry more and more, we see changes in seasonality of supply, like Travis mentioned. We see a lower ewe inventory because, like I said, producers are just questioning, can we stay in this another year? And ultimately, we see a lower lamb supply. So as we deal with all of this volatility in the marketplace, we've seen extreme changes in the lamb market, and we're going to discuss that here in just a few minutes. But really, all of these things that are affecting the producer obviously get brought all the way through the channel, all the way through the chain, and we watch everything very closely at Superior Farms to see if there's ways that we can help either with these constraints, if there's solutions, or if we can just be part of the conversation for those solutions. So like I mentioned, if we're thinking about the traditional market, which would be part of Superior Farms would be part of the traditional market, we're sending lamb off to retail and food service. As we look across the map of the United States, all of the states that we pull supply from for the traditional market have been affected. They continue to decrease in ewe inventory, which ultimately affects our supply. And we've seen a large change in some of these states as well as to the type of sheep that they are producing, even if we are still seeing those decreases. Where we see there is an increase in breeding ewe inventory, all of those states are really focused on either direct to the consumer marketing or that ethnic trade that Travis mentioned as well. And so that we love seeing that. We want to see plus in every single state in the United States to increase our supply. And that's kind of where we are right now. We need to see that increase. But as we look at just the traditional trade and the lambs that we're getting in, we're seeing a decrease across the map. And again, something that Travis brought up again is seasonality of supply. If we look at this graph, 76% of our lambs in the US that are born February through May. And if we add January in there, that's 85% of our lamb supply. So this becomes really challenging as we see that 85% of our lambs are born in a 5-month window, and we have to supply the American consumer 365 days a year, a consistent American lamb product that's fresh. And so this is obviously one of our largest constraints in the industry as we look across it from a producer, as we look at it from a packer, or even retail and food service, and how do we make this better? In 2020, 2021, we've seen an even more seasonal supply than ever before, as we see reduced ewe numbers in California, Arizona, and Texas, and even the Midwest. And not only that, but Texas being one of our biggest states to help us with that out of season lambing is almost 90% transition to hair sheep. And that's a huge problem for us, because those lambs are going into the ethnic trade and they're being traded at lower, lighter weights, and we're not seeing those in the traditional market. And so when we transition such a large state, the largest ewe producing, lamb producing state in the country, to hair sheep and to the ethnic trade, that has a huge impact on us and what we can supply to our customers. And then along those same lines of the seasonality, this is just a typical day in the industry of what goes through the coolers. And I know this graphic is crazy to look at, but as we think about that 5-month supply chain that we have and what we have to do to spread that out into 52 weeks out of the year, these are the lambs that are going through the cooler at any given day. So if we look at that green line, that's ultimately where our target is, that 65 to 75. And then that darker blue above it, the 75 to 85, even those two colors are the colors that we wish the whole cooler could be, because that's where we have the most consumers. That's what most of the consumers want, is that. But as you can see, we have lambs that are 100 and up. We have lambs 85 to 100, and then we have lambs all the way down 45 pounds and down. This is hot carcass weight, and these are all going through the plant, and we still have to find a home for them. So as we talk about consistency being such a huge factor in lamb quality and helping the consumers, you can see where the packers ultimately do struggle. Like Travis mentioned, and we feel the same, we would never say you need to breed this type of ewe to this type of ram, have these type of lambs, and bring them to us at this exact weight, because we know that that's not realistic. We know that's not how the US sheep industry is, and we would never tell you that something is better than another. And ultimately, we understand that as diverse as the US is and the US sheep industry is, we have to utilize the resources that we can so that we can all stay in business. And so we do find homes for all of these lambs, and we do have customers obviously that will take these different weights. But as you can see, day to day, this is about a 1.5 year time span. In this graphic, we see a lot of change and a lot of different things come through our coolers at any given time. To add to that, where are we at with lamb consumption? And I know Megan will talk on this even more in depth, but I just wanted to add this graphic. Just like I started with the constraints, what are the challenges that we have in the industry? And I think that's so important to start with, because it just tells the full story. We know why production is decreasing. And if we think back to the US roadmap study in 2014, we were painted the picture of the things that we needed to improve upon. And at any given meeting, you're going to hear the word production efficiency, profitability, and improving productivity, essentially. And as we do that, we need to really, really push in these next several years, because we haven't seen a huge change in that. And we are finally at a point where lamb consumption is growing. At Superior Farms, we joke that 2020 was ultimately the platinum lining for the U.S. lamb industry, as we saw demand for lamb increase by 40%. And so as we see something so great and so exciting for the sheep industry, we have to keep up with that in production numbers, because the thing that could hurt us more than anything is growing that demand, letting those consumers find that they love lamb, and then giving it all away to imports because we don't have the supply. And ultimately seeing this low supply that we currently have, it's really disheartening, and it's hard to swallow that. We do not want to give up this demand, this growth of lamb consumption. People who are excited to eat lamb, they went away from chicken breast and pork chops because they were at home and they were sick of cooking that every other day, essentially, as they had 4 meals, to getting excited about lamb. And we give it up to imports because we're low on supply and we're increasing our prices, or just because we just don't have the supply in general. From there, I was asked to talk about what the ideal lamb is for your market. And Travis hit this already, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But if we think about the traditional lamb market, the retail and food service trade, we're really looking at, like I showed in that graph, that green and that dark blue, 70 to 80 pounds hot carcass weight. So 140 to 160 pounds live lamb, and a yield grade 2 or 3, preferably 2, but 3s obviously work. Every single cut in the traditional lamb market is going to go out in a box. Extremely different from what we see in the ethnic lamb trade, where we're really working with 45 pounds and down. When we think about the ethnic trade, excuse me, and those all go out as carcasses, and they are not as concerned with the fat cover. They just want to reach that 45 pounds or down, so no more than a 90-pound carcass, or a 90-pound live lamb, excuse me. And then on the traditional lamb side, obviously fat cover trim is a lot more important, yield grade, and not only to the customer of a consistent product that's going out to them, they're seeing that consistent trim, but also to the packer ourselves, because I'm going to show you a graphic here in a minute, but every knife cut that we make costs the company money. And so these are extremely important targets to hit for us in the lamb industry, and thinking about quality. Another question that it was prefaced to me before giving this presentation was, are lambs currently being overfattened? And this is absolutely not the case for 2021, because we are so current on our supply that is going through the facilities. We couldn't be overfattening them. As fast as we can get the supply to us, with as short as we are on supply, we're doing a great job on keeping current on weights and providing a consistent product to our consumers. It is truly just that we do not have the supply. As Travis mentioned, this is something that we really focus on at Superior Farms. The camera grading system is very important to us, not only from how we can utilize it at the plant level and provide the right pieces and parts or cuts to our consumer. Obviously, we have to create a box that is not just one lamb cut of loin chops or rib chops, but we have to put in like animals into that box to provide to our consumer to make them happy day in and day out. And so, but also this is really important as a producer in making progress, creating your benchmarks. And so we do provide a producer portal. If you send lambs to us, you're able to log on with your individual credentials. You're able to look at every single lamb that you are sending through the plant. And I think this is so important. When I was at the American Lamb Board and now at Superior Farms both, whenever I would give a presentation, I would always ask producers, how many times have you seen your lambs on the rail? And it's crazy to me that so many, and I would say over 50% have never seen their lambs or maybe any lambs in a scenario like this where those lambs have the hide off, and understand what their harvest sheet means. 24 hours after a lamb is harvested in our facility, a producer is able to log on to their producer portal and see these exact pictures, or they're sent a harvest sheet as well, and they're able to look at how their lambs performed. But so many producers have not been able to see that lamb performance. And so it's really challenging to make benchmark decisions, to make goals for your next year's lamb crop if you don't know how your lambs performed this year currently. And so we really find this to be such an incredible tool for both us as well as producers. And I spend a lot of time talking to the producers about what their lambs look like, and if there's things that we could change, what they should be focusing on genetically. And again, I just think that this is something that everyone should be doing. Whether you direct market and you go and look at those lambs wherever they're harvested, it's easy to collect carcass data. You could pay a 4-H or FFA member even to collect that carcass data for you. It's very simple, but it is very challenging to make genetic progress in things like lamb quality or carcass performance if we don't know what they look like. So we take the information that we get, obviously a picture of the back, a picture of the side. The camera system creates an algorithm and gives us all the information that's important to us, like a yield grade, quality grade, and our ovine cutability calculation, which is essentially boneless, closely trimmed retail cuts, as well as a prediction on what all of the primals are going to weigh. So where you see breast, rack, shoulder, those are all predictions on what those retail cuts are going to weigh. We go at the plant level, we take this information, we go back to this cooler inventory. We know what's in the cooler. We know what, more importantly, exactly those predictions. We know those algorithms. And then from there, we fill customer orders in the fabrication and case ready room. And so between those two tools, it is so incredibly important that we have that so that we provide consistency to our customers. I mean, as we look at this graphic again, there's just so many differences and so many different carcass types that are coming through that this is the way that we provide consistency to our consumers. As far as buying livestock, as far as what's important to us, the two most important factors when we're looking at lamb quality is that USDA yield grade, and that's because of fat. And like I said, every time we move that knife in the fabrication or case ready room, that costs us money. That costs us an employee. And we also worry about the calculated ovine cutability. If we have a low yield grade 2 or 3, and we have a high percent of edible red meat, that is a great product that we're providing to our customer. And as Travis provided a picture of lambs hanging on the rail and showed us the yield grades 1 through 5, here's a demonstration that I think is so important. And especially as I just mentioned again, you may have never seen your lambs on the rail or a lamb in general with the hide off. Why do we push yield grade 2s and 3s? And even when we look between a yield grade 2 and a yield grade 3, we're not even at half a pound of trim coming off that yield grade 2, but at yield grade 3, we're at 2 pounds of trim weight that is coming off, so that we can provide the consumer with something that they actually want to cook, something they actually want to pay for, because they don't want to pay for that extra 2 pounds of fat that they're not going to consume. They're going to give to their dog, maybe if their dog's lucky, or they're going to throw in the trash, and they're going to be disappointed, and they're not going to want to buy this product again. And then we move from a yield grade 3, 4, and 5, and that is just, I mean, absolutely ridiculous when we're looking at those yield grade 5s. And so, of course, when we're thinking about seasonality of supply, if we're not as current on our supply as in the last 2 years, we've seen lambs go through that are like this, and it's very hard to give this to a consumer. And so we don't. And so what does that mean for us? That means that we're rendering 4 pounds almost of fat off of that. That's costing us how many extra minutes in the fabrication room or case ready room to cut that fat off, and an employee that is not very happy that that's what their job is day in and day out, is cutting that amount of fat off of these racks. So it is extremely important as a producer and as a packer to give you this education and this information, I guess, that this is why yield grade 4s and 5s just are not ideal, and how that affects the industry. Every decision that we make in the plant is based on the same things that we push in the industry. Production efficiency, we look at our yields and our production efficiency day in and day out. That's what we make our goals and benchmarks on for the year. And we're an employee-owned company, so when our employees come back and say, how am I supposed to fix my yields when we're getting these lambs in? Those are questions to consider as a producer. And I would be happy to have more conversations around this and how we can fix this in the industry, or ways to alleviate this, obviously. And again, a lot of this comes back to things that are out of our control, like that seasonality supply gap. But I just think it's very important for you to understand the things that we deal with as a packer as well, and how it works to get that perfect, consistent product to the producer or consumer, every single time. From there, I wanted to jump into, Melinda, can you still hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Okay, for some reason my PowerPoint does not want to. Okay, it looks like it finally went.
Little frozen moment there.
Yeah, I didn't want to progress, so then I was worried I lost you guys. Talking to myself, I didn't know for how long. One of the things that Superior Farms is lucky enough to do is we do have several teams throughout our company that a lot of other lamb processing companies do not currently have. And one of those is obviously our marketing team, as well as our PACKER'S team, that they're looking at ways to increase consumer usage. They're looking at ways to improve our efficiency in the plant every single day. That's what PACKER'S does. And we're fortunate enough, like I said, to work as a team on these things of how we can make lamb more approachable, how we can make the process of providing the lambs to the consumers easier. And so some of the things that we've done is not necessarily cut innovation, I would say, but is more just the versatility of lamb and how to make it so that it's basically bulletproof. One of our most successful products that we sell is the cook and bag leg. It's just like a turkey. It has a pop-up timer in it. You cook it in the bag. There's no mess. You pull it out afterwards. All of that normal mess that you would have with a roast and not wanting to clean that roasting pan. I know that's one of the main things that I'm like, oh gosh, if we make this tonight, then that's just unnecessary mess that we have to clean up, and it just makes the whole kitchen a mess. And I think that's why this is so successful. Everything happens in the bag. You throw the bag away. You cannot foul this up because the pop-up timer tells you that it is done. And all you have to do is cut it. And a lot of other products that have been successful are the same type of thing, just seasoned products. So we have pre-seasoned products going in to a lot of our retail grocery stores that have been very successful. They know that they just need to follow the cooking instructions of what the temperature is, how to cook it, and cut it up for their family. And we've had a very successful pre-cooked shank as well, that's obviously pre-seasoned, that has been in several of our Southern California retail stores, and it's extremely successful. They just have to warm it back up. And so these are some of our most successful products that I wanted to show you, but also Same as the American Lamb Board. We just look at ways. Our marketing team obviously works very closely with the American Lamb Board on ways that we can show that lamb has versatility as well. So whether we're looking at lamb pastas or lamb burgers or lamb pizza, how can they incorporate this product into their day-to-day recipes? And I think that was extremely successful for 2020, and probably part of the reason that we had higher lamb demand, because they still wanted to make a simple meal, maybe, or a simpler meal, but they wanted to try a different protein. And then of course they also wanted to be challenged in the kitchen with something a little bit more fun and hard to make, challenge themselves, since they were just sitting at home day in and day out. And so we've seen a lot of success, like I said, with these types of products over the last year. And finally, the last thing that I was asked to cover is, what do you think needs to be done to increase the domestic lamb supply that gets to the consumer table? And I think that there's three main things that we need to focus on. The main thing is that we need to produce more lambs, so increase our lamb supply at the right price. We have went from one extreme to the next from 2020 to 2021. And we saw horrible lamb market prices last summer. They were terrible. It was probably the effect of COVID and losing food service, right? But everyone was worried that they weren't going to make any money last year. And now we're seeing incredible prices in the marketplace. Lamb is so high, and we just need to find that right balance. We need to produce more lambs, be more efficient. Again, here that production efficiency comes, but at the right price, because the second point is it has to go to the right price to the consumer as well. And we need to control some of that volatility at the marketplace. We went from the beginning of this year to seeing loin chops in retail at $9 a pound. And then just several weeks later, we were up to $22 a pound. We built lamb demand, and consumers are going back to the grocery store. They're wanting lamb, and then they see it for $22 a pound, and we are chasing them away. And so how do we bring that volatility to a halt? We want, as a packer, as Superior Farms, we want every segment to make money. We need the farmers, the producers, to make as much money as they can. That's why we see this market as great. And we love everyone making money. But the biggest problem is when does the consumer, or when do our customers, retail and food service, say, no, sorry, it's too much, we can't do it, and so we're going to import. And so this is exactly the things that we have to find that fine balance on. And I think finding that fine balance comes from collaboration throughout the industry. The roadmap said it. We've talked about it for 8 years now, how collaboration is so important. And we need to come together as an industry and say, how do we control this volatility? How do the producers make the most money they possibly can, and that translate to an affordable product for the consumer to say, yes, I'm putting this in my basket this week. And then of course, just continuing to have consumer outreach and education from the American Lamb Board. I know Megan will talk about this, from Superior Farms, from our team, working with our social media outreach, working with chefs, and just continuing to push out new recipes and education around ways to cook lamb. I think those are the three main tiers, and really the first two come together so closely with that volatility. But that's how we get more American lamb on the dinner table, rather than giving it up to imports, because we're at a point where consumers want lamb, and we've got to keep it to ourselves. You know, in ways of doing this, I just wanted to point out, I think this is so important. Like I said, productivity, production efficiency, profitability, they just seem to come out of my mouth anytime I'm talking about the sheep industry lately. And I think everyone feels that way at conventions and state meetings. That comes up so much. but we really need to take a look at how to improve our industry. And here's just a glimpse of the productivity improvement that the dairy industry, swine industry, beef cattle, and broilers have had. We're looking at 3 decades here, basically, and they've all increased to almost 50, 60% in their productivity. And I wish that we were in person so that we could say, so I could have people raise their hands and say, where do you think we're at with the sheep industry? But unfortunately, as great as webinars are, we can't see each other. So I'm just talking to my screen, and it would be really silly for me to ask you to raise your hand. But when we look at the increase in lambs per ewe, and we look from 1995 to last year, we are at 1%. Do we even account that as an increase? And so this is something that I think becomes so important, something that, again, a collaborative effort of industry stakeholders, producers, packers, we all become part of this conversation and say, how do we truly improve our productivity? How do we get more lambs on the consumer table? And this is something that Superior Farms has found to be important. We've worked on it over the last calendar year. And from that, and I just wanted to mention this quickly, we have thought up a research and development opportunity. Essentially, it's called the Sheep Discovery Center. It will be based in Utah, and we're looking at industry constraints. We're looking at unprecedented opportunities to improve upon production efficiency and profitability in the sheep industry. And we're not recreating we're not recreating the wheel. We're not jumping into crazy things that have never been thought of. These are all technologies that are already out there, and we're just being the crazy ones, I guess you would say, to partner with producer partners on how do we improve production. And so it's essentially just a convergence of technologies that are available to our industry that we're bringing together, like the crazy cool lights. That picture, that's a fodder system. It's all grown indoors in 6.5 days. We go from wheatgrass seed to wheatgrass fodder. And those should help challenges. We're hoping, and we may fail. We absolutely may fail. And that's okay. We're going to fail at several things. But this is one of the things that we're looking at as we're dealing with wildfires. We're dealing with terrible drought across the West. And losing some of those resources. Can we efficiently grow lambs, and can we efficiently feed out ewes on a fodder system like this? Can we move to more shed lambing so that we have higher lambing percentages, higher weaning percentages, thinking of things like that, and then ultimately bringing in a sustainability and animal stewardship practices and benchmarks, again, already created in the industry, but just bringing them all together and converging all of these great ideas and practices for producers to say, oh, the Sheep Discovery Center tried this and it did not work. We're not spending the money on it. Or this worked at the Sheep Discovery Center. We told the Sheep Discovery Center to do this, which is absolutely what we want. We want it to be a partnership and a collaboration across the industry. And maybe we could spend some money on this now that it was successful. But ultimately, let us make the mistakes. You tell us the things to do. And that's truly how we see it going. And ultimately, creating a blockchain for the sheep industry, digitizing lamb carcasses, understanding traceability from the time that lamb is born in the old turkey sheds that we're converting into a lambing barn, all the way through the process, and truly creating more education for the sheep industry. And so I just wanted to share that really quickly as it's being talked about in the industry, and we're hoping that we'll have some ewes in there soon. So I wanted to mention that. I feel like it fits really well in the idea of how do we improve upon the industry. And so if you have ideas around that, whether it's the Sheep Discovery Center, If you have questions about Flock 54 genomics or just Superior Farms in general, just want to chat about your sheep, you can always give me a call or send me an email at the number provided. So I appreciate Melinda and Dr. Bass for including me today, and happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you so much. You have quite a few questions, but I'm going to lump them all together into one overarching question that seems to be sort of popping up, and that is basically, how can people connect with you when we're talking about this shortage of lamb product? And there's quite a few questions there that kind of ask, how many lambs do I need to have, and how do I connect, and how do you decide on the pricing and that type of thing? So maybe you could get into that just a little bit for us, and then we'll get into the more specific parts in a minute.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to reach out to me on the number provided. And I'm sure Melinda can share that contact information after the webinar as well. But I am part of the livestock team. My role is Director of Producer Resources. And so I absolutely can get you with the right livestock buyer from our team, depending on where you're located, and see if you would go to the Denver facility or Dixon facility. They can work with you on pricing for, if you have 20 head that you need to harvest here soon, they can work with you on that. And we also have some opportunities for some longer term contracts as well. And so there's definitely opportunities either way that you have it, whether you just happen to have extra lambs this year, or you're wanting to become a producer partner with us. And along those lines, I'll also be able to talk to you more in depth about some of the other producer programs that we do offer our producer partners. And we have financing opportunities, different things like that we provide, a producer leader program as well. And so the more involved you become with Superior Farms, the more lambs that you're sending, the more opportunities there are. So I'm very happy to, like I said, if you just want to talk sheep, you can always give me a call. That's my cell phone number that's provided. So feel free to reach me that way, or email, and we'll get you in contact with the right people to get your lambs harvested.
Great, thank you. There are several sort of more specific questions that if maybe you have time after this, you could go through, or people can just call you, but I might skip over some of those more specific questions on that front.
Absolutely.
So I apologize to our audience, but feel free to reach out. One question is, which EID systems are compatible with your readers?
We actually have the Shearwell system in both of our facilities, but they're able to read any of the EID tags that are coming through. Not all of our producers have the Shearwell tags, and we're still able to read those. So,
okay. So we know that you didn't want to let us know what breed we should raise, but do you have an ideal breed that you like to see in the plant?
Oh gosh, no. That would come down to personal preference. That wouldn't be talking for Superior. And no, I think it comes down to your personal preference, what works for your resources that you have available to you, and makes your operation work. And so if you enjoy, if they work off of those resources, and you enjoy looking at them every day, I think that's the most important thing. We see obviously a lot of crossbreds come through, and I've been fortunate enough to try a lot of different lamb, and I can say that all I can say is that American lamb I prefer over anything else. And so just keep doing what you're doing.
I agree. We have good lamb here. We just don't have enough of it.
Exactly.
So the last question I'll pitch at you today is, you had a slide talking about increased in productivity for sheep. The 1% increase, was that referring to the meat product or the number of lambs born?
Number of lambs
product per ewe, or number of lambs born?
Yep, number of lambs born.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to come visit with us today. It's been really informative, and I hope that you get some people reaching out to you through this.
Of course, yeah, I'll be around for questions later as well. So
okay, great.
thank
Thank
you.
you.